Let me take you back to the 1870s. You're standing on a quiet street in London, or maybe Manchester, or Edinburgh. The air is brisk, a little smoky with coal dust. And before you is a handsome red brick house, tall windows, a polished brass knocker, curtains drawn just so. To the modern eye, it looks quaint, charming even, the sort of place you'd pay too much for on Airbnb. But what if I told you that stepping over that threshold meant entering a carefully curated death trap? Because in the Victorian age, the greatest threats to your life weren't in the factories or the slums. They were inside your own home, cleverly disguised as modernity, luxury, and love. This is the hidden history of domestic life in the 19th century, not as a quaint backdrop, but as a minefield of arsenic, gas leaks, exploding wallpaper, lead-poisoned toys, and beauty creams that could kill you. Let's walk through it, room by room, substance by substance, assumption by deadly assumption. Because the story of the Victorian home is not just one of manners and parlors. It's a cautionary tale about progress without regulation, beauty without science, and convenience without consequence. Let's start in the drawing room. It's the showpiece. It smells faintly of furniture polish and coal smoke. The wallpaper? A vivid green damask shimmering slightly in the gaslight. That color, a striking, almost radioactive green, was the height of fashion. It also contained one of the most dangerous substances known to man, arsenic trioxide. In 1775, Swedish chemist Carl Wilhelm Scheele discovered that arsenic could produce an intense green pigment, now called Scheele's green. It was soon followed by Paris green, even more vibrant. But here's the problem. Both pigments were unstable. In damp or poorly ventilated conditions, which describes most Victorian homes, these wallpapers could release arsine gas, a highly toxic vapor. Doctors began to notice that families, particularly children, were falling mysteriously ill. Symptoms included vomiting, skin ulcers, respiratory failure. Some died. And yet, the British government refused to ban arsenic in wallpaper. The debate became public in the 1850s when a chemist named George Gilbert exposed the dangers. But the wallpaper industry pushed back hard. It's not the paper, it's bad drains, they insisted. In 1859, Queen Victoria herself ordered the arsenic paper stripped from Buckingham Palace. But in ordinary homes, the green stayed. Step into the parlor now, the room designed to impress visitors and showcase the family's taste, education, and refinement. Velvet curtains, polished mahogany furniture, glass cabinets filled with porcelain and curios. It's the very picture of Victorian elegance. Yet, the parlor hid its own dangers. The walls, remember, might still be lined with arsenic-laden wallpaper, and the air thick with dust that carried invisible poisons. But more insidious were the flash-rooms and decorative objects. Upholstery fabrics were treated with chemical dyes and flame retardants that today we'd classify as toxic. The bright reds and yellows in rugs and curtains often came from arsenic or lead-based pigments. And then there was the gas lighting. Gas lamps were the height of modern convenience, but they leaked, slowly filling the air with carbon monoxide, the silent killer. Families could breathe this invisible gas for hours, suffering from headaches, nausea, and fatigue, all mistaken for other ailments. Victorians tried to control these dangers with ventilation, opening windows and doors. But the cold climate meant that many rooms were kept closed tight, trapping poisons inside. And let's not forget the fire risk. Parlors often held numerous candles, lit for ambiance and reading, perched on delicate sconces and chandeliers. A stray gust, a careless brush of a curtain, and a house could be consumed in minutes. Now walk upstairs, enter the master bedroom. On the dressing table sits a silver brush set. Next to it, powders, creams, tinctures, some with handwritten labels, others in elegant glass bottles, etched in gold. This is a woman's realm, private, delicate, and increasingly dangerous. Victorian ideals of femininity were steeped in fragility. A well woman was pale, soft, passive. A glow could be mistaken for sin, or syphilis, so women turned to artifice, creams to whiten the skin, powders to matte the shine, tonics to suppress the blush of health. These weren't harmless indulgences. Face powders were often made from lead carbonate, brilliantly white, wonderfully opaque, and terribly toxic. Long-term use caused lead poisoning, fatigue, joint pain, neurological symptoms, and, in severe cases, death. For color, women used rouge and lip stains made from vermilion, which contained mercury sulfide, or vegetable dyes mixed with noxious alcohol bases. Mercury absorbed through the skin could damage kidneys, impair cognition, and provoke tremors. One of the most shocking products on the market was marketed as Dr. Mackenzie's arsenical complexion wafers. These were pills made of arsenic, intended to whiten the skin from the inside out. The ads were clear. They would banish blemishes and leave the skin translucent as alabaster. They worked by destroying red blood cells and reducing circulation to the surface of the skin. And then there were the eyes. In pursuit of an alluring, wide-eyed gaze, women dropped belladonna extract, derived from deadly nightshade, into their eyes to dilate the pupils. The result was captivating, and also dangerous. Prolonged use caused blurred vision, light sensitivity, and in some cases, permanent blindness. These rituals weren't vanity, they were survival. A woman's appearance shaped her social worth, her marriage prospects, her family's honor. To be seen as beautiful was to be protected, to be plain, or worse, blemished, was to risk being invisible. And so women poisoned themselves for protection. Step next into the kitchen, the bustling nerve center of domestic life. Here, Victorian cooks juggled coal stoves, cast iron kettles, and foodstuffs that today would make health inspectors weep. It's tempting to picture the kitchen as the safe, warm heart of the home, but it was another minefield of hidden killers. Let's start with the food. This was the age before refrigeration, before food safety standards, before laws curbing adulteration. What entered the Victorian stomach was often a chemical cocktail. Sugar was cut with chalk or powdered bones. Bread was stretched with plaster of Paris or chalk powder to increase weight and profit. Even worse, potatoes were sometimes sprayed with arsenic-containing pesticides or mixed with cheaper tubers to stretch supplies. But the worst offenders were food colorings and preservatives. Bright red candies used carmine, derived from crushed cochineal insects, and sometimes mercury-based compounds. Green peas might be tinted with copper salts to make them look fresh, and yellow cheeses were sometimes brightened with lead chromate. Victorians weren't entirely blind to these risks. Medical reformers and social campaigners raised alarms, but change was slow. Money and convenience often won out over safety. The kitchen was filled with gas appliances, including the new coal gas stoves. Gas leaks were common and deadly, unseen and odorless. Carbon monoxide poisoning caused headaches, dizziness, and sudden death. And then there were the candles. Candles, often dipped in tallow, burned with a smoky, sooty flame, filling rooms with dangerous fumes. Worse still were jellied candles. Made by mixing cheap animal fats with volatile solvents, they could explode unexpectedly, sending flames and molten wax flying, igniting fires and causing horrific burns. So while the kitchen symbolized nourishment and family life, it was a place where every meal carried risks, from the poison in the food to the threat of fire and gas. Now, let's tread softly into the nursery, the heart of hope and joy in any Victorian home. Brightly painted toys, colorful fabrics, and soft embroidered linens filled the room. But beneath that cheerful surface lurked dangers no parent could have imagined. Consider the humble painted toy. These weren't the handcrafted wooden blocks or cotton dolls we might imagine. Mass production was booming. Factories churned out cheap, shiny toys painted with pigments loaded with lead and arsenic to make them colorful and glossy. Children chewed on these toys, sucked on their edges, unknowingly ingesting poison with every bite. Lead poisoning in children causes developmental delays, abdominal pain, and sometimes seizures or death. And in the cramped urban homes, poor ventilation and limited access to clean water meant these toxins had devastating effects. Then there was the matter of cotton and wool fabrics. To give them brightness and durability, manufacturers treated them with arsenic-based dyes and chemical mordants. These fabrics were used for curtains, bedding, and even baby clothes. The constant contact with skin, especially for infants, meant repeated exposure to toxins that could cause rashes, respiratory problems, and long-term poisoning. The nursery was also a prime spot for cotton wool fire hazards. Cotton balls soaked in petroleum jelly or camphor were common soothing agents for babies, but highly flammable. A stray spark from a candle or gas flame could turn a moment of calm into a deadly blaze. Beyond toys and fabrics, the very furniture in the nursery was a risk. The varnishes and paints used often contained toxic compounds, and cribs painted in bright hues were not just beautiful but poisonous. Sadly, infant mortality in Victorian Britain was staggeringly high. And while many causes were infections or poor sanitation, we now understand how environmental toxins inside the very homes themselves played a tragic role. The Victorian bathroom was a relatively new addition to the home. Indoor plumbing became widespread only in the later 19th century. This innovation promised cleanliness and health, but brought with it fresh dangers. Plumbing pipes were commonly made of lead, leaching into the water supply. Lead poisoning was widespread but invisible. Soap, too, contained harmful additives. Arsenic and mercury compounds were common, intended to whiten skin or disinfect, but often causing irritation, poisoning, or allergic reactions. Laundry detergents were rudimentary and harsh. Bleaching powder often contained chlorine compounds that released toxic fumes, and the steam generated by boiling water sometimes caused burns and respiratory issues in cramped laundry rooms. The Victorian obsession with cleanliness was paradoxical, a struggle to banish visible dirt while unknowingly inviting invisible poisons. So, what are we left with? A home full of love, ambition, warmth, and lethal chemistry. The Victorians didn't set out to poison themselves. They were, in many ways, us, enthusiastic, curious, charmed by the new. But they lived in a world where science moved faster than understanding, and where regulation lagged miles behind innovation. And behind every shiny invention is a question. What price are we really paying? Because the most dangerous things aren't always the ones you fear. Sometimes they're the ones that feel like home.